And so it is a great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Alice McDermott, who is actually the 2010 recipient of the Fitzgerald Award. Now, her talk is entitled Stories and the Quintessence of Dust, so we have story commonality in here. Our program includes wonderful information about each of our speakers, so I'll just say a few words from the program and let Alice come up and give her talk, which is on Stories and the Quintessence of Dust. Alice has published 8 novels and an essay collection called What About the Baby? Some Thoughts on the Art of Fiction, which is very relevant to what we heard this morning. Her 8th novel, The Ninth Hour, was a finalist for the 2017 National Book Critics Circle Award and the 2017 Kirkus Prize for Fiction. And with that, let me introduce and make space for Alice.
Good afternoon. Hope you enjoyed your lunch. I know you enjoyed the morning conversation. Wasn't that wonderful? Oh my gosh. Thank you. So happy to be here. So I'll launch into this, whatever this is. And hope the conversation will continue on into the afternoon and even further. So storytelling and the quintessence of dust. It was late January of this year when Jackson Breyer called to ask if I'd like to address the Fitzgerald Conference today. The brilliant Richard Powers, he said, had suggested the theme of story and the more than human. Jackson wondered if I might manage to say something in keeping with this theme. I wondered if I could manage to say anything at all in front of the likes of the brilliant Richard Powers. An hour or two before Jackson's call, my daughter and I had been discussing what had taken place here in our nation's capital just a little over a year ago. On that day, I had left my desk at lunchtime to turn on the news, an unusual circumstance for me, but one that had become habit during 2020's lockdown, when I found myself obsessively tuning into Governor Cuomo's daily harrowing and yet oddly sustaining press conferences, as the governor became, in the midst of so much grief and misfortune, a kind of reassuring dad. Well, we all know how that turned out. On January 6th of 2021, however, I tuned into the news at midday simply to witness the ritual certification of November's election, the beginning of the end of the current president's tenure. We all know how that turned out as well. Anyway, just before Jackson's call, I was telling my daughter about my astonishment last year, my quiet dismay, as I watched the insurrection unfold in real time on our family room TV. My daughter quickly amended my recollections, as daughters will do, by reminding me that she had actually been at home on that day and had come into the family room when she heard me, quote, yelling my head off. The way she described that winter afternoon, I had not watched the Capitol invasion with quiet dismay, but utter disdain. I had, in truth, stood just inches from the television screen, poking at it and crying out, "Look at that asshole! Oh my God, look at that one, and that one, look at this jerk! Who are these idiots?" With my memory so recently refreshed, it's probably no surprise then that when I heard Jackson say, "more than human," I thought, no, not more than, better than. Storytelling and the better than human. I mean, butterflies and bees and every manner of beast, dogs especially, purple mountains, lakes and streams, fungus, forest, the non-metaphorical swamp, the planet, the stars, the whole of the created, non-human world. Surely more than human refers to everything that is not human, and so refers to that which is better than, superior to. Because, let's face it, all the jerks, the fools, the stupid, metaphorical assholes in creation reside in that middle ground between the less than human and the more than human. All the jerks in creation are us. Surely, I thought, the theme of this year's conference should be storytelling and the better than human, which made me recall Hamlet and a well-worn bit of Shakespearean cliche that often comes to mind, not because I was an English major, but because I had a father who was educated in the New York City public school system at a time when all students were required to memorize such things. A father who, all his life, loved to demonstrate his skill by declaiming at our dinner table, "What a piece of work is man! How noble in reason, how infinite in faculty and form and moving, how express and admirable. In action, how like an angel. In apprehension, how like a god. The beauty of the world, the paragon of animals. And yet, to me, what is this quintessence of dust? Man delights me not, nor woman neither." Storytelling and the better than human, damn right, I thought. What isn't better than dust, than us? A frame of mind that led me to cast a similarly cold eye on the idea of storytelling itself. Of course, in our loud-mouth hubris, we humans see ourselves as the only creature who tells stories, but honestly, what human being, a tip of the hat to Roald Dahl, weaves a better tale than the clever spider? Tip of the hat to E.B. White. What human writer can contain in a few lines the sweep and the scope of century-spanning lifetime as the trees do? Tip of the hat to Richard Powers. Another Shakespearean earworm came to mind. In the mouths and minds of the likes of us, isn't all storytelling essentially a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing? Which led me, this time in English major mode, to think of Faulkner's Benjy in The Sound and the Fury, and then some lines from that other Williams' famous Nobel acceptance speech. He said, "It is easy enough to say that man is immortal simply because he will endure, that when the last ding-dong of doom has clanged and faded from the last worthless rock hanging tideless in the last red and dying evening, that even then there will still be one more sound, that of his puny, inexhaustible voice, still talking." Puny, inexhaustible, still talking. Words that might well describe the very voice that spurred last year's insurrection, no? The very voice that haunts our discourse still. Worse yet, at the time Jackson called, I was reading a play called Ballygungare by the Irish writer Tom Murphy. Ballygungare translates as the place without laughter and tells the story of a senile Shaughnessy, a professional storyteller, who tells the tale of the laughing contest that gave the town its name. A story that the demented old woman repeats and repeats to her long-suffering granddaughters, but never finishes. Here are some pertinent, "what a piece of work is man" lines from Tom Murphy's play. "Sure, we weren't meant to be here at all, making mock of God's prized peace, the structures and system. Oh, I have wrestled with enigmas all my lifelong years. I've combed all of creation, and in the wondrous handiwork of God have found only two flaws, man and the earwig. Of what use is man? What utility the earwig? Where do they either fit in the system? They are both specimens desperate, without any control, and therefore unfree. But God will not be mocked, especially when he was so clever at creating all things else. Still, God must have said, I'll leave them there and see what transpires. Storytelling as the act of this flawed, dusty quintessence of dust shouting in its puny, inexhaustible voice, if not stop the steal or hang Mike Pence, a tale anyway, full of sound and fury and endless, desperate repetition, signifying nothing, that seemed about right. What I'm trying to say is that it was with some misanthropic glee that I told Jackson that I would address you today on the subject of storytelling and this quintessence of dust. An opportunity perhaps to bemoan the hubris of this wide world's only literal, that is, non-metaphorical, storytelling creature, us. A creature who more and more I was beginning to think delights me not. Although I have to confess as well that I chose the title because I love the word quintessence. I love the adorable Cupid doll sound of the not quite harsh quint, and then the sustained sibilance of the double S's and the gentle suspiration it takes to get to the final ence. Even utterly detached from its meaning, it's a beautiful word, a petit boucher of sheer music. But, of course, it's difficult to keep even the loveliest of words detached from its meaning, something all writers know and most politicians eventually find out. I suppose at the time I was thinking of the meaning of Shakespeare's quintessence as it relates to quintessential, that is, the most perfect or typical of a quality or class, or the intrinsic and central constituents of its character. And certainly it's this familiar definition that makes Hamlet's wry turn of phrase so delightful to the contemporary reader, or at least made it delightful to me at the time of Jackson's call. It's one thing to be the quintessence of style, or of wisdom, or of good taste, but of dust? Are there hierarchies of dust? Dust is dust, isn't it? As Genesis so soberly puts it, from dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return, the biblical authors never bothering to distinguish just what kind of dust we're talking about here. The worst of dust or the best of dust hardly seems a distinction worth noting. And while quintessence has its musical charms, dust, the word itself, not so much. As for its definition, fine particles of matter as of earth, something worthless, the surface of the ground, or, to the British, refuse ready for collection, as in dustbin. Surely the biblical author and translator who chose the word dust to tell us where we come from and where we're going would object to Faulkner's proposition that it is easy enough to say man is immortal simply because he will endure. Dust to dust is hardly the kind of immortality or endurance we might hope for as we make our way, all of us inevitably, to dusty death. And yet, thinking about the word itself, an occupational habit, I considered how many writers, how many foolish storytellers full of sound and fury have made some pretty good use of it. There's Faulkner's own Intruder in the Dust, Ruth Prowar Jamvala's lovely novel Heat and Dust, or the marvelous YA prose poem Out of the Dust, and Was, a handful of dust, which brought to mind two of the poets, Eliot for one, who lent Wa this title. Writing in a state of mind not unlike my own last January, Eliot composed 100 years ago these grumbling lines. What are the roots that clutch? What branches grow out of this stony rubbish? Son of man, you cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images, where the sun beats and the dead tree gives no shelter, the cricket no relief, and the dry stone no sound of water. Only there is shadow under this red rock. Come in under the shadow of this red rock, and I will show you something different from either. Your shadow at morning striding behind you, or your shadow at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. I thought, too, of the great lyric poet, Edna St. Vincent Millay. And you as well must die, beloved dust, and all your beauty stand you in no stead. This flawless, vital hand, this perfect head, this body of flame and steel before the gust of death or under his autumnal frost shall be as any leaf, be no less dead than the first leaf that fell. This wonder fled, altered, estranged, disintegrated, lost. Nor shall my love avail you in your hour. In spite of all my love, you will arise upon that day and wander down the air obscurely as the unattended flower, it mattering not how beautiful you were or how beloved above all else that dies. And Rupert Brooke. When we are dust, not dead, not undesirous yet, still sentient, still unsatisfied, we'll ride the air and shine and flit around the places where we died, and dance as dust before the sun, and light of foot and unconfined, hurry from road to road and run about the errands of the wind. Or this absolutely lovely poem by the poet Danusha Lamouret that popped up in my mailbox in the pandemic's dark hours. Dust. It covers everything. Fine powder, the earth's gold breath falling softly on the dark wood dresser, blue ceramic bowls, picture frames on the wall. It wafts up from canyons carried on the wind, on the wings of birds, in the rough fur of animals as they rise from the ground. Sometimes it's copper, sometimes dark as ink. In great storms, it even crosses the sea. Once, when my grandmother was a girl, a strong gale lifted red dust from Africa and took it thousands of miles away to the Caribbean, where people swept it from their doorsteps, kept it in small jars, reminder of that other home. Gandhi said, the seeker after dust should be humbler than, the seeker after truth shall be humbler than the dust. Wherever we go, it follows. I take a damp cloth, swipe the windowsills, the lamp's taut shade, run a finger over the dining room table, and still it returns, settling in the gaps between the floorboards, gliding the edges of unread books. What could be more loyal, more lonely, more unsung? Well, maybe not so unsung after all. This dust of which we fools are the quintessence. A conclusion that encouraged me, spurred by the poets, to look again at that lovely word. Thanks to the footnotes in my battered college Shakespeare text, I was reminded that quintessence also refers, quintessence,